starting a school year is not a small thing. It's a big thing. It's an eternal thing if you think about it in terms of what we're trying to teach our kids. We're trying to pass on the truth of God, the importance of our understanding of who He is, and really a love and appreciation for Him and what He's given us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Zan podcast, where our goal is to help you thrive in your homeschool journey. Let me take just a minute to ask you to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen or watch, including YouTube. And be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We post a lot of content there too. I'm so excited to have Nathan Pierce back with us again this week. If you missed part one of this two-part episode, please go back and listen to it. Nathan is dedicated to homeschooling and protecting and promoting homeschool freedom. He's the executive director of Family Protection Ministries, and he has been involved in advocacy work at the California State Capitol for 20 years. In that role, he monitors legislation, meets with legislators throughout the year, and encourages and equips families to be involved civically. Nathan was homeschooled through high school and holds a BA in political studies, and he and his wife, Betsy, homeschool their 8 children. So stay tuned. I think you will really be encouraged by this episode. This podcast is brought to you by BJU Press Homeschool. Homeschooling is an exciting adventure we take with our children. One of the most challenging parts of this journey is choosing the curriculum you want to use. BJU Press Homeschool is a curriculum you can trust. All the books, resources, and videos have been designed with you and your child in mind. Their curriculum is educationally robust and rich, taking into account that children have different learning styles, strengths, and needs. Mom, you are in charge. BJU Press Homeschool is here to come alongside and support you. Do you need help with the teaching load, or is there a subject you just don't want to teach? Their amazing video courses are available for all grades and almost every subject. BJU Press Homeschool believes that homeschooling can produce a new generation of students who know God, love their neighbors, and stand firm in their faith. For more information, go to bjupresshomeschool.com. That's bjupresshomeschool.com. One of the things, Nathan, you and I really have in common, so many things, but a love for homeschool freedom and pretty much having devoted our life to that. So I have to take a minute just to explain my earrings to everybody.
Yes.
I was just doing a podcast with Nathan, his podcast, and we were just talking about all things homeschool freedom. So, and one of the things is that freedom isn't free. I think that's what the Korean monument says in Washington, D.C. And so both of our dads, my dad and Joe's dad, are both World War II vets. Joe's dad is still alive and turns 100 tomorrow. And Fort Jackson, which is our huge Army base in Columbia, South Carolina, found out about Joe's dad and brought him to a graduation. They have they'll have 400 or 500 kids because it had to be inside today because of Hurricane Debbie at a graduation, and they recognized Joe's dad for his service. And I think we didn't realize the value of each of us growing up with World War II vets as dads, because freedom carried a costly price for both of them in terms of their service in the Navy. And so we were there, and I had on my July 4th earrings, and we were just celebrating freedom and watching all these new recruits, because this is a boot camp. This was a boot camp, and 23 immigrants who came in as immigrants left as American citizens, willing to fight for the freedom of this country. The whole thing was so incredibly moving. And then they honored Joe's dad for his service and
that's
just
amazing.
his love for this country. It was so special. So I have just between that experience at Fort Jackson and doing the podcast with you earlier and then doing this podcast now, I just feel like I'm immersed in thoughts of freedom today. So I want to move on and get you to tell me a little bit about what you do at Family Protection Ministries. And then I want us just to talk about the place that each family has in contributing to homeschool freedom.
Sure. So to start with what I do at Family Protection Ministries, the best way to put it is that I run this nonprofit, but it's really a focus on monitoring the legislature, reading, which means mostly reading bills and trying to
hundreds of bills.
Yeah.
In a state like California, you've got to have hundreds of bills you have to go through every year.
Right. And we use software to help us with that, but there's over 3,000 bills introduced every year. So we have a lot to go through to figure out, okay, what are we going to focus in on? So we have to detect which bills are going to be problematic, and then we have to sort of triage to figure out, okay, which ones can we focus in on, and are there any other groups that can help us focus on the things that are of a concern to them, perhaps, and so that we can really focus in on the homeschool specific bills. So I look for legislation that impacts homeschool families, whether it's something that impacts their ability to educate their kids, whether it's curriculum standards or teaching credentials or whatever it might be relating to education, but then also looking at bills that impact parental rights, a parent's right to make decisions for their children, whether it's a parent's right to choose the educational option for their child or to choose medical care for their children, things like that. But we primarily focus on homeschooling, and you might think that that's not something that would come up very often, but in California, with that many bills, there's so many things that have unintended consequences on homeschooling.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes they're not perpetrated, that's too strong a word, but sometimes they're introduced by our friends who don't understand that it has serious repercussions for us as homeschooling parents.
Right. So there was a bill. One example this year would be a bill that had to do with making sure that certain pesticides weren't used within a certain number of feet of a school. And their wording included all homeschooling families because we function under the private school law here in California. And so they were going to put a map up with every homeschool family's home on this map to make sure that all the farms kept pesticides a certain number of feet away from homes. Well, we don't want our houses on a map. And so we initially talked to them about, how to come up with a different solution. And typically for me, I will usually come up with 5 or so different alternatives for them to get what they want without impeding what I want. So if we can come up with a solution that makes everybody happy, that's better. And like I said, for the most part, they don't know that their bill is going to hurt people. They think it's just a good thing.
That's right.
So I write up solutions, and I usually run them by the guys over at HSLDA because they have attorneys that know how things will practically work out in the courtroom later on. And so they help me figure out what's the best wording. And then we go to the authors and say, I always put my favorite at the top of the pile and hope that something along the way will be something that they're happy with. And so this particular issue of pesticides putting our homes on a map wasn't super complicated because there's already a law on the books that tells them to keep pesticides away from private homes. So we already are protected, and they didn't they didn't think that whole thing through. Of course, they're not experts on private school law, so they're not really thinking about all the different parts of that. But ultimately, they took our amendment language, and I ended up doing 2 rounds of amendment language because we worked with the Department of Education to work on, how it would be implemented, which led to another level of amendments to the bill. But sometimes it takes so much longer than you might think to get just little wording changes through the entire process.
Yes, that's right. And it takes somebody devoted to it too, because you can't just stop midway through that work. You've got to have somebody who's going to see that process to the end, or we're going to end up with lots of little bills that choke our freedom.
Right. That's right.
And so there is a place for organizations like yours. And in the days when I was lobbying for homeschool freedom at the state level in South Carolina, you've got to have somebody committed to seeing the process through. And so having said that, Nathan, let's talk about what families can do. Those people who can't devote 40 hours a week to homeschool freedom. What can a family do to promote freedom?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And we have a number of ways that we like to promote families being engaged. And one of those is simple and local. And that is reach out to your local legislator, and that can come in a lot of different forms, but you can go and just meet them and let them know that you're a homeschooler. And that by itself will be a positive thing in almost every case, because if they can see that you care about what's going on in the world around us by showing up at one of their events, whether it's a town hall meeting or some sort of a hearing somewhere, and you just meet them and introduce your kids. Don't leave them at home. No, bring your family and let them see your family together and let them meet the kids. Because like you said, Zan, when young kids can speak with an adult, it's an unusual thing in our culture.
Yes, that's right.
And that stands out. It really does. And that works in our favor when they're realizing, oh, this is a decent family here, and this is unusual that these little kids are talking to me and acting like that's a normal thing for them to do it too.
Right. That's right. And, one thing you said, Nathan, that really changed the way I look at Capital Days. I just did this article for HSLDA where I studied Capital Days, homeschool Capital Days around the country for like 2 years and visited many, many of them and spoke at some. But you said something to me that what makes homeschool Capital Days so important and so powerfully effective is that whole families attend.
Yeah.
And ever since you said that, I've talked to legislators in other states, like, what's it like to have families own your capital, your state capital? And they all say it's the most powerful part of these legislative days we host, because nobody else brings whole families. There might be kids there with the school or scouts or something like that.
Sure.
Or there might, there are always adults there. But to see whole families who love each other, I don't mean perfect families, but
Sure.
whole families there together who love each other, they just say it's so unique, such a unique occurrence.
Yeah. And I think whatever the context of that sort of engagement, whether it is at a town hall meeting, whether it's going to visit a district office, which I really encourage families to go and visit the district office, which is pretty local to you. And in California and some states where the capital is a long ways from home, there's usually a district office that's not too far away from where you live, and you can go and visit with your legislator who is there sometimes. And that can have a huge impact on the legislator, their staff. I have one volunteer lady who's got a pretty good relationship with a state senator now because she met this state senator when she was an aide working in a district office, and now she's a state senator. And it's a huge benefit to be able to have these relationships that you've built over time. And it's not that it takes, like you said, 40 hours a week overtime. I'm talking just a visit here, just a note that you put in the mail, different things over a longer period of time as you get to know a legislator or their staff member. It can have a huge impact being a representative of the homeschool community, a positive impact for our freedom. And whether you do it at the district office level or you show up at Capitol Day once a year and go to a legislator's office at the Capitol building, it can really, all of those things can have a big impact. And so it doesn't take a huge investment of time. Although, going
a little
to the
bit of courage,
yeah,
a little bit of courage.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. I tell people they need to be willing, winsome, and wise. And those are the things
brilliant.
that
Yes.
really helps people to overcome that, because you really, it does take courage, because sometimes we set these people up on a pedestal as our politicians are so unapproachable.
Yes.
But really,
yes.
But really, if you think about it, they're people too. And frankly, they need the love of Jesus just as much as you and I. So we need to have that love for them and also be willing to be God's representatives in showing God's love to them and showing that we care about our freedoms for our family, but not just for today, for our children and for their children, so that the freedoms that we enjoy now can be enjoyed by future generations.
And one thing that you and I have talked about a lot, Nathan, in all of our many conversations about homeschooling freedom is the power of those relationships. I think one of my favorite stories is in the early days of our homeschool battles in South Carolina, for lack of a better word. I was in a Senate Education Committee hearing, and I knew there was no way we were going to come out of there with a positive vote. And I remember one senator said, "Well, I just have to tell you something. A homeschool family invited me to their home for dinner." And just like you were talking about, he was shocked. He said these kids were so articulate. They talked to me as an adult like they were used to doing that, and I realized they were. And he said it changed my whole perspective toward homeschooling. And after he said that, about 3 or 4 more senators said, "Well, that's interesting, because I met this homeschool family and I had the exact same response." And it changed the way that vote happened that day. And it was because one family was brave enough to say, "Come into our home." And if you don't want to say, "Come into our home," just like you said, let me meet you at your office, or let me call out my senator or my assembly person at Capitol Day and just introduce our children. It's your family is a very powerful tool, makes it sound like a project rather than what it is, but the family's important. And when somebody sees a functioning family together that are working toward a common cause, I really think is powerful.
Yeah, and I've seen others be sort of tune in to things that are happening. They see families caring about something. I remember a hearing that I went to. Actually, my family came to it. My wife brought my kids. We had, I think, 3 children at the time. And my oldest daughter was, she's always been very, very communicative. And she was walking the Capitol halls with me, and Fox News was there. And they asked if they could, well, they had a few questions for me, but they asked if they could talk to her. And I think there's this incredible power, like you said, of seeing these young people that are interested and they're willing to engage, and you can tell that they're interested, and that goes a long way It really does, in helping people be aware of something that's unusual, it's interesting, and it's worth considering, sort of in a way beyond what the rest of the political party might be saying, that we need to go this way, we need to have more restrictions or whatever it is. But it kind of makes you turn your head when you see these young people being interested. The same kind of thing with the debate crowd. You see kids involved in that, and they're actually discussing serious issues. And it's a pretty unique experience.
So let me just remind our the moms and dads listening or watching today, we recently had Christy Shipe on the program, who is the founder of the NCFCA Debate League. It's the Homeschool Debate League. Don't ask me now what those initials stand for. but there's a full 2 episodes on the power of debate in your students' lives. And I don't mean argument with people. I mean learning how to articulate and form solutions and discussions and all those things. So I would encourage you to go back and check out that podcast, because it was not really around when I was homeschooling my kids. And so, but it's been such a powerful tool in the hands of Nathan and so many others, that if you hadn't considered doing that with your children, I would say, look into what's available in your community.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, so Nathan, tell us a little bit about the 2 events you have coming up in California.
Right. So we have CHEA, Christian Home Educators Association of California, is doing a leadership conference down in San Diego, and that is on August 23rd. And you, Zan, are speaking there. Going to be talking to the leaders about some great leadership tips, and also Will Estrada from HSLDA. There's going to be some other speakers there as well. And we're trying to encourage leaders. We're trying to give some solutions to problems that they're currently dealing with, and also just encourage them to engage with each other, which I think is really important, as we've discussed. And so that's going to be August 23rd. And there's information on our website. You can check that out. And then the next day is HFD, Homeschool Freedom Day. And that is also Zan is going to be speaking there, as well as Will Estrada and some others, where we will have a state senator speaking there, with some others, including a homeschool debate student is going to be giving a speech there, and some others. We're going to be training people. We'll be inspiring them to get involved in homeschool advocacy as families, and also training them in how they can actually make a difference. What kinds of things can your family actually do to make a difference, to impact homeschool freedom in California? So those are the 2 events. August 23rd is the Leadership Conference. August 24th is Homeschool Freedom Day for your whole family.
So tell us what your website is so that people can find it and register today.
Yeah, absolutely. Our website for Family Protection Ministries is fpmca.org. That's fpmca.org.
And really, Nathan and I were talking about this before we actually got on the podcast itself, how important it is in this day of virtual meetings. And listen, I love it because I podcast doing that. But sometimes we just need to be in the room with other homeschoolers. And as I speak at conferences really around the world, Joe and I just got back from speaking at the Global Home Education Conference in Great Britain, the UK, and it's always a powerful, encouraging thing to be with other homeschoolers. You learn from them, you share ideas, you encourage each other. Sometimes we just need that shot in the arm, as a little boy said when he wanted his dad to come stay with him because he was scared at night. And the daddy told him to trust in the Lord. And he said, well, I need somebody with skin on, And so sometimes we just need somebody with skin on.
That's right.
And, that we can be together and encourage one another and love one another. And so I really applaud you for doing all that. So, all right. So Nathan, what lessons do you think we should be teaching our children? I guess what I'm thinking about is you have an advocacy book that you wrote, and then you had your children work on it, I think, and turn this into an advocacy book for teens.
Yes. Yeah, we did that based on some materials that we developed for Capital Day, actually, over the years. And it's something that we realized would be helpful for parents originally, in helping them to understand the power that they have to have an influence over their legislators and how much impact they can have when they get their family involved. But then realizing that we need to really reach the next generation too, to inspire them and enable them, empower them to have an influence too, because young people, as we've said, have a huge ability to impact the legislators and their staff. It's unusual for young people to weigh in on political issues, and homeschool students have a unusual ability and flexibility to be able to engage on these issues. And so it's an area where I think it's very it's important for us to weigh in and help teach our kids to weigh in on these issues, because it's not going to be long before they're the leaders of tomorrow. And we need to take that seriously and recognize that they're going to be in the driver's seat before long. Just like when we're teaching our kids to drive, we don't want to just let them loose one day by themselves in a car to go drive it down the freeway. We want to have some training first. And so we need to get them going early so that we can show them and walk through the path with them in learning how to be willing, wise, and winsome in providing them the tools that they need to be impactful for Christ in our society.
And one thing, Nathan, we've talked about before is just taking a 3-minute freedom break every day. And just for 3 minutes a day, focus on freedom. Maybe you pray with your children for families who are living in areas where they're oppressed physically, they're war-torn areas. We need to be praying for their freedom. We need to thank the Lord for the freedom we have in this country and consider what we can do as families to enhance that freedom. Freedom ultimately was God's idea. For freedom, we have been set free. The Bible is just full of scripture verses that let us know that God sets us free, not so that we can fulfill our own desires, but so that we can serve our neighbors. And then if you have littles, or no matter what age of your children, you should always vote in every election, every primary vote, and never go to the voting booth by yourself. Always take one or more of your children with you. You can go, online, or if you still use a newspaper, or find out, always know who the candidates are. And if you have referendums or ballot initiatives or however you do it in your state, read those to your children and explain them to them. I remember even as an adult, I would call my dad and I would say, Dad, this is going to be voted on in the election. I don't understand it. And he would take some time to explain it to me. And so we just want to raise there are people literally around the world who are dying for the right to vote. And we just sometimes treat it like it's an inconvenience rather than the treasured privilege that it is. And just the other thing is, get to know your legislators. Doesn't take a lot of time, takes a little bit of courage, but continually do those things. Like you said, when you were a little boy, you were telling me the story about handing out flyers when you were 4 or 5 at park days.
That's right. Yep. Everybody can help.
That's right. And we, freedom should be that type of thing that we wake up in the morning and we're thankful for. When I was threatened with jail, And the thing that hit me so hard was I had never appreciated my freedom until I was threatened and I thought I might lose it. And so we don't, I'm particularly aware of that today after being out at Fort Jackson with all the new recruits and celebrating my father's years of service during World War II, that we all need to be devoted to freedom and realize that freedom isn't free, that we all need to pay a certain price for it in effort, in prayer, in raising our children, all those types of things. So Nathan, as we close, I want to ask you two things. Do you have a favorite Bible verse that the Lord has used to encourage you in your homeschooling? And then the other thing is just what would you tell moms and dads to encourage them as they start their new school year?
Yeah. So for the first question, my verse is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. And that's such an encouragement to me no matter what I'm doing, because I know that he's there and he will direct me. And so I can't just trust in my own strength because his strength is so much better. And that kind of leads us to the next thing, which is, encouraging moms and dads as we start the school year. We have to ask God for his help no matter what we're doing. There's no thing that's too small to ask God for help in. And with that being said, starting a school year is not a small thing. It's a big thing.
Right.
It's an eternal thing if you think about it in terms of what we're trying to teach our kids. We're trying to pass on the truth of God, the importance of our understanding of who he is, and really a love and appreciation for him and what he's given us. And whether we're talking about creation or freedom, God's given us everything that we have, and he can give us wisdom for this school year too.
Amen. Well, as we wrap up today, I just want to remind you that there'll be some things in the show notes, episodes we referred to here. An article I wrote on Capital Days, finding out, we'll put a link to that article, and we'll also put a link to the events that Nathan is going to be involved in August 23rd and 24th. One is Chia of California, their Leadership Day, and the other is Homeschool Freedom Day.
Homeschool Freedom Day, yep.
Homeschool Freedom Day. And I will be there. I'm privileged to be there for both of those things. So we'll put a link to your website in the show notes. People can go there. So as we, okay, and I just have to give this other little note. My husband said to tell everybody he did not hit me. I've got a pretty good black eye today. I get injections for my migraines, and sometimes it just causes a black eye. And so I'm coming to you today in all the glory of having a black eye that I tried to cover with makeup very poorly. So Nathan, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for all you've done to promote freedom in such winsome and wise ways. I love those 3 W's. And we just continue to pray that the Lord will bless you. One more time, tell people how they can find you.
Yeah, my website is for Family Protection Ministries. It's fpmca.org.
And then Chia is...
Yes, it's chiaofca.org. That's CHEAOFCA.org.
Okay. And so we want to thank you for being with us today. We know you have many, many choices of where you spend your time. We pray that you've been encouraged, and we pray that the Lord will continue to bless you and your family in your homeschool endeavors. And until next time, bye.